This is the Rebel Author Podcast, where we talk about books, business, and occasionally bad words. Hello, Rebels, and welcome to episode 184 of the Rebel Author Podcast. Today, I'm talking to one of my faves, JJ Arias. JJ obviously came and interviewed me for the release of A Game of Hearts and Heist. Thank you, JJ. And now I am turning the tables on her to talk all about creating conflict in romance. And I think a lot of the tips will be superb for you. Even if it's not romantic conflict, I think you're going to get something from this, because there is a lot of these tips and craft tricks that can be applied to interpersonal conflict. So just conflict between two characters. Obviously, you just remove the bonking aspect of it. But first to last week's question, which was, what's the best book you've read this year? Eden Collier said, well, apart from A Game of Hearts and Heist, which I consumed, by the way, and anything Gail Carragher has written, I'd say The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley, which I'm currently reading and loving. In regards to vampire stuff, I'd recommend the first 3 series of Being Human, the UK version, and maybe bits of the later series. So I tried to read The Watchmaker of Filigree Street and thought it was beautiful, but I did DNF it purely because it's just not really my style. Might have been the historical aspect. But if you like historical kind of steampunk stuff, I highly recommend it because it was sumptuously, deliciously written. Jen Roundell said, I think I must have asked 2 questions in this episode because lots of vampire recommendations. So Jen Roundell says, Catherine Smith has a delicious vampire series. Excellent. Loving these vamp recommendations. I have been plotting my next series. I'm definitely going to do the vampire series. I'm just having a look at some of the market data to see whether or not it's going to sell. Not that you can 100% predict anything, but I am kind of deciding whether or not it should be the next one or not. Anyway, Heather Button said, I second anything by Gail Carragher. Not sapphic, but there are some definitely sexy sci-fi space vampire books out there. Sought by Evangeline Anderson pairs a male trank alien, not sure what that means, with a fated female who's afraid of needles. Interesting. Okay, Kerry Hardisky said, I'm currently reading / listening to Raid by my friend C.E. Dorset. It's only available on their newsletter and in audio on their YouTube channel right now in serial format, but they are planning to release the book sometime later. It's book 0 of their series, the Shadow Phoenix Saga, and it's so good. It's a fantasy adventure, incredible world building, diverse LGBTQIA+ characters, fantastical creatures. CE is a non-binary author. Oh, they also have a couple chapters up. They only have a couple of chapters up so far, but I'm loving it. And then Ian Worrell said The Companions by R.A. Salvatore. Awesome. Okay, so this morning, one of the things I did was write, quite frankly, an obscene to-do list. It filled an entire page of A4 it was like my best schoolgirl handwriting. So it wasn't like it was a scrappy list. It's just a fucking long one. So my question to you this week is, how do you structure your to-do lists? Maybe you don't use them. Maybe you do. Maybe you use Post-its. I kind of chop and change because apparently I like to fuck up my life and my systems by changing everything every so often. But anyway, let me know. Okay, the book recommendation of the week this week is Signal Moon by Kate Quinn. This is a short book. It's probably a novella, actually, I would say. I think the audio is maybe 2 hours, maybe less than 2 hours, I think. So it's quite a short one. Maybe it's only an hour. I can't remember. I listen on 2 speeds, so it like fucks my ability to know how long these things actually are. Anyway. Signal Moon by Kate Quinn. This is a dual timeline set in World War II and present day, and it is phenomenal. It's historical and modern day, and it's about a woman who worked at Bletchley Park? Bletchley Park. And she basically intercepts a signal, a transmission from the future, and it is just extraordinary, really beautifully written. The world building's incredible, and I highly recommend it. It was a very short, sweet, beautiful read. Okay, so on to personal news and updates. First of all, my friend Karen Ferreira, who has been on the podcast quite a while ago now, talking about children's book illustrations. I actually met Karen in South Africa, which was cool, when I went last summer. But anyway, Karen is doing a boot camp. It's 3 days, 6 hours a day on building your mailing list. But that is actually paid, but there is a webinar that's free, and I do have an affiliate link for the webinar. Or maybe it's for the bootcamp, I'm not sure. Anyway, I have a link to this webinar, and the webinar is free, and it's how to get your first 100 email subscribers and beyond. So if you would like to get information on why building an email list is important, if you want to understand like mistakes to avoid with your reader magnet, what a reader magnet is, how to create one, all of that good like basic stuff around reader magnets, email lists, then you will want to join this free webinar. So I will put a link in the show notes to that. Probably ought to add that the webinar is on Wednesday, April the 19th at 1 p.m. US Eastern Time. So yes, that's Wednesday the 19th of April at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, US Eastern Time. And the boot camp is in May, but you'll get all the information about that. I was also lucky enough to be included in T.B. Markinson and Miranda McLeod's latest anthology, which was the I Heart Sapphic Favourite Scenes from Favourite Authors anthology. 190 plus authors selected 1,000-word scene that they were most proud of, and that went into the anthology. So if you like sapphic fiction, then I will include a link to that in the show notes as well. Okay, finally, onto my stuff. If you are going to be at the 20 Books Seville conference in a couple of weeks' time, or you're going to be at the London Book Fair, then please do let me know, because I am going and my diary is starting to fill up. So I would love to give you a high five, say hello, catch up, nerd out about books. So yeah, please do let me know if you are going. And in other news, I finished editing the book. So I started, I don't know when I told you I started editing, because I can't remember when I did the podcast last, but I have finished. It took me a week, a working week, a working week. So that's great news. It means I've sort of written and edited the book in 5 weeks. I am super excited. I am just about to send the book to my critique partner. There's a couple of areas that I think still need some work, but this is the point of editing, isn't it? So I am looking forward to a brainstorm with my critique partner once they've read the book. My wife is reading the book, and she was like, this is just as good as the first one. I ended up giving her the half of the manuscript early because I was literally going fucking insane. I was driving myself beyond sanity, and I was convincing myself that I hadn't created a book that was as good as the first one, which is total bullshit. I absolutely have. But you know what it's like when you're in the throes of, oh my god, I can't write. Why we do this to ourselves, I don't know. But now I'm at the other end. I'm all excited again because I didn't. It's funny because I completely did not register the fact that now I'm at the edits, that means I get to do like marketing and talk about it and all of my favourite scenes. And oh my god, there is so many sexy times in this book. I should probably just start writing erotica, to be honest with you, because there was a lot of schmexy times in the first book, and this book is way more. It's anyway, it's not the point. You'll get to see. But I'm super excited. And it means that I get to reveal the cover soon, and I get to commission the cover of book 3. And oh my goodness me, I'm just having so much fun. And I'm just about to start outlining for book 3, and I'm super excited for that one as well. I'm just if I could say excited one more time, it's bringing me joy, guys, okay? And So yeah, and I love the moment that I get to turn off the creative brain and I get to then be marketing and like think about the book in a different way, and that's super fun. I'm obviously not quite there because I need to do the tweaks and fix just these two little bits that I would like to improve. But still, I am thoroughly pleased that I have created this book so quickly. It is giving me pause for thought because obviously I'm getting to the point where it's a book a month. I don't particularly want to write a book a month. I want to retain the capacity for that speed, but I don't necessarily want to do it every single month because I do too many other things and I enjoy those other things, frankly. So until I either don't do those things or I have some more time, I don't think that I can increase my pace anymore. So for example, I won't be writing now, probably until the last week of April, maybe May, because I need to obviously do the edits. I need to do all the marketing, all the planning for the launch and for the rest of the year. And then I'm in Seville and then I'm at the London Book Fair. So, and I still need to outline the next book. So it's going to be, I would say, a month before I get to write again. But then hopefully the whole of May, I will do another book. Fuck, sounds mental when I talk about it like that. The other thing that I have learned, I think that I have mentioned this, is that my activator is a big liar. And yeah, everybody drinks. I've mentioned strengths already. We're not even in the fucking episode. So I've been tracking. I'm really dedicated with my tracking because tracking my output and you don't have to do words. I think authors can do a time or whatever they want, chapters done or whatever. Tracking my words has been super useful for me because that is what has enabled me to get to this point. For those of you who have followed this podcast for a while, you will know that it took me 4 motherfucking years to finish Trey, the third book or final book not the final, but the third book in the first series that I wrote. And there were a plethora of reasons, but even prior to that, it would take me 6 months to get a fiction book done. I was not a fast writer. And going through this strengths learning and coaching and also having factual data on what my actual output is has been incredibly helpful for me to be able to production plan and to know exactly how long things are going to take me. And obviously I need to put a bit of slippage time in. My calendar has slipped already this year. It has changed, but actually I've pulled it back. So I'm not too far off what I thought I was going to do, and actually I've managed to slip another book in. I don't quite know how I've done that, but anyway, it's happened. So I don't really know why I'm telling you this. I think I'm telling you this because I don't want you to listen to me say, it takes me a month and then feel disheartened, because it's taken me 10 fucking years to get here. Literally, I started writing with intent to publish in 2013. So and it's only in the last year, after taking so much coaching, that I have got to this point. But the exciting thing is that I now can production plan, and it's giving me so much joy to be able to set a deadline and then hit it. Like, I actually hit the deadline. And this is like incredible and strange for me, because the pandemic, I would say 2 years of the pandemic completely fucked me, and I didn't hit a single deadline, and I completely lost faith in myself, and that was really hard. So I know I've got off on a tangent. Come on, Sasha, you're not even talking about the fucking point you were supposed to be talking about. Activator. What has been very helpful is to have the tracking data of words written per day and then words edited per day, because I definitely thought that it had taken me a considerable amount more time to write and edit this book than it actually has. So that's good to just keep myself in check and stop convincing myself that it's taking me forever to write, because it's not. So basically it's just a little word of encouragement to track however works for you, if you find that useful. I find it ridiculously useful, probably because number one, competition and data. I am feeling particularly excited for April because I do get, I say break. You should see the state of my to-do list. But I really like the flip-flop between the intensity of drafting and then for 1 month, and then having a month where all I do is marketing. And like that batching is really helpful for my brain. It feels like it's rest without rest. So basically what I'm saying is I'm working myself into the ground, but like in a different way. So it's okay. God, guys, don't be me. Just don't be me, okay? Oh, what am I like? Anyway, I'm excited for this month because I get to do like lots of marketing. Achiever basically is like slapping her dick around and like, smashing shit off to-do lists. And also we get to travel. I love traveling. So yeah, I'm excited for this month. But then by the end of the month, I will be gagging to get back to words. I did decide to shift around the calendar. So I am going to be writing fiction next. And then this is so that I've got 3 in the series so that I have a bit more marketing flexibility. And I think because it's now only taking a month, actually, I'm only really delaying non-fiction by a month. So I don't feel too bad about that. And then June and July are both dedicated to non-fiction. And hopefully I will get 2 projects complete in those 2 months. And then I have August off. Wow, what a treat. You're so generous to yourself, Sasha. Oh, now we're talking to ourselves in a third person. Let's move on. Okie dokie. The rebel of the week this week is AJ. AJ says, I was a good student at school, straight A's, never turned in my homework late, etc., etc. But I was also stressed because of that. Had a pretty short fuse. I'm not sure if you have this in the US, but I'm not in the US, so I don't know. But in the UK, we have form rooms at school. Each school year is split up into smaller groups called forms. You start each school day in a designated form room where the register is taken by your form tutor. Form rooms are also used for break times if it's pouring down with rain, where we stash our bags at lunch, etc. One day, I was the last person in the form room before lunch. On my way out, I crossed paths with Mr. Raphael, the geography teacher whose room was our designated form room. He spotted a fudge wrapper on the floor and decided to make an example out of me by making me stay behind at lunch and clean the whole room. What the fuck? I felt this was desperately unfair, and being the dramatic teenager I was, I decided to avenge myself. Do you know what? I would have avenged as well. Mr. Raphael's room was the last remaining blackboard in the school. So I stole a pack of chalk from his desk, and over the course of about 2 weeks, I hollowed out the ends of each chalk stick with the pointy bit of protractor, stuck a match head in each hole with white tack and powdered over the end of each stick. Then I swapped my doctored pack of chalk for his normal one. I wasn't in the room when he when he struck the blackboard with my doctored matches, but I can't even get it out. But I was part of the fire evacuation that was triggered when he struck not 1, but not 2. But 3 of the doctored chalks set off the fire alarm. I'm not sure if this is rebellious or petty, maybe both. But it sure was cathartic. Oh my god. Oh, it's fucking hilarious as well. I actually have tears of laughter. Oh my god. It's definitely rebellious. A little bit petty, but also super petty. I would have done it too. Oh, that has made my day. AJ, you superstar. If you would like to be a Rebel of the Week, please do send in your story. It can be any kind of rebellion, something big, something small, or something in between. You can email your Rebel story to Becca over on rebelauthorpodcast@gmail.com. No new patrons today, but a huge thank you to all of my existing patrons. You guys make me feel like what I do is worthwhile, and I love hanging out with you and all the chat that we have. And yeah, like the Rebel challenges are amazing. So thank you so much for your support. If you would like to support the show and get early access to all of the episodes, then you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black, and you can do that from as little as $2 a month. This episode is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid, but rather than me tell you why I love them, I'm going to let Shane Miller tell you all about why he uses them and why he loves them. And Shane has a brand new podcast called the Write Better Fiction Podcast, which will have been live, I think, 2 days when this episode airs. So make sure you go check that out as well. And a link will be in the show notes, of course.
I use Pro Writing Aid to clean up my manuscripts before they go to my editor. Pro Writing Aid's great because it's not just a grammar checker. It teaches you how to improve your writing. It has reports for all those tricky areas authors hate, like style, passive voice, blue words, my own arch nemesis, cliches, and more. I've got high competition in my top 5 Clifton strengths, so the scoring feature really pushes me to improve my writing, because, of course, I want to beat the system. For me, the best thing is the way it integrates with Scrivener. I make all my changes in Pro Writing Aid, and Scrivener updates automatically, so no more hopping between programs, which is perfect. I'd highly recommend using Pro Writing Aid.
Hello and welcome to the Rebel Author Podcast. Today I'm super excited because I have one of my fave humans on the show. JJ Arias is an Amazon best-selling independent author writing about fictional lesbians of all varieties. She started out writing fan fiction until she decided to stop stringing together pieces of subtext and start writing her own main text stories about LGBTQ+ people and those who love them. JJ is a first-generation Cuban American who was born and raised in Miami, Florida. She's an obnoxiously Scorpio woman married to a uniquely tolerant Cancer lady. They live together in South Florida with 2 unhinged cats, a melancholy pit bull, and an aggressive parakeet. Hello and welcome back.
Sasha, thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming back, because last time, you got to interview me and I was so desperate to interview you. And I'm really excited because I obviously have read one of your books, which was fucking amazing. So tell everyone a little bit about you and your journey. Like, how did you get to where it is you are now?
Yeah, so I've always liked creative writing, right? Like most of us. When I went to college, my mom was like, you need to find something that makes money. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's not writing. This was obviously way before self-publishing. If not, she would have been all for that because she's very entrepreneurial, my mother. So naturally, I went to law school, right? Because that's the natural shift there. But I always stayed kind of writing, and I started writing fan fiction because that was really fun, but I didn't think I'd kind of do anything with it. And then like 2018, I want to say, I was like, I can write one of these romances that I read on my Kindle. And I did. So yeah, pretty fun, not expecting it to kind of do anything. And it's gone pretty well, I have to say. So I'm glad I gave it a try.
So you are still a practicing lawyer for all the, we won't have to go into any detail, but do you ever want to write full time, or do you think you would always stick with law?
I don't think I would ever want to write full time unless I was maybe retired, like much later in the future. I don't write anymore. So I've kind of tested this out and taken like a week off and just said, like, what would it be like to be a full-time writer? I don't write any more words than I write when I come home from work, or if I do it in the morning before work. And I find that so much inspiration comes from being like out in the world, right? And like people you see and interactions you observe, and you're kind of like, I wonder if those 2 people dated, what would that be like? So I can't imagine I would want to write full time unless it kind of coincided with retirement.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody needs to drink, but remind me, do you have, I know you have consistency, and that kind of not writing anymore is very like consistency, strength. Do you also have intellection?
Yes, I think that's my number 2, I want to say.
Okay. So that makes that. But I know Becca talks about who the types of writers or the types of strengths who are more likely to want that other thing to give the brain that space. So yeah, that's really interesting. I sort of wish that I had a thing that I wanted to do that wasn't writing, because like the focus tunnels and obsessiveness that I can I don't know how healthy it is, but yeah, okay. So I recently read and, like, let me tell you, devoured Guava Flavored Lies. So I wondered if you could start by telling everyone a little bit about the book.
Yeah. So it's an enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers, kind of straddles that line between two owners of bakeries, these two kind of franchises in Miami. And I joke these two people have hated each other since before they were born. And each family kind of blames the other for stealing these pastry recipes a million years ago, before the families migrated from Cuba to the United States. And so we find them, that's kind of their backstory, and we find them stuck together on this outdoor food festival circuit that they have to do, every year for several months. And on this particular circuit, all these kind of secrets and tensions and all this stuff kind of comes to a head. And then they realize they're not as different as they thought, and a lot of things kind of that they hadn't realized about each other. And of course, that the line between throttling the neck and straddling the hips, very fine.
So fine. It's so confusing. I think the thing that I loved so much about the book, and I will ask you about this in a bit, but was the banter. Like, not banter, sorry, bickering. I don't think I have ever read bickering that good. Like, it was fucking exceptional. Like, and I just couldn't get enough. And I just don't understand how you did it. So you have to just download your entire brain. So let's talk about that. I think I, in my questions, wrote banter, but hopefully you knew that I meant bickering.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, how the hell did you create that bickering? And like, what advice do you have for other writers?
I have to say, they are my favorite characters I've ever written, and I missed them. And that's never really happened to me. I kind of feel like I've told the complete story, and they're the only characters that I really kind of think back and I'm like, I wonder what they'd be doing, because they're so, it really, everything is bickering, right? Like, you can't say good morning without it being a fight. Mm-hmm. So I think the first kind of tip I can give, and banter, bickering, I think it's like the same, in the sense of how you would write it. I think turn up the volume on one of the characters and make them kind of outrageous and extra and a little bit over the top, because I think that drove so much of the interactions. Because most people, even if you don't like someone, can kind of have, a cordial interaction. So one of the characters fully cannot, right? She's just herself all the time. She's aggressive. She's intense. Everything is the end of the world. She's my favorite, by the way. And I'm not going to say she's not a little bit like me, but whatever. So she is going to kind of instigate, right? Like a lot of, and because she's so outrageous in her responses, it brings up the volume on every interaction she has with almost anybody, but definitely with the love interest, right? And then I think kind of, and this I think you could do with anybody, even if you have more subtle characters, give them a history, so that even when they're bickering about something that just happened, like, why did you took my parking spot, right? It's also about 20 years ago, we tried out for the same position on the softball team, and I don't think it's fair that you got it. And I'm still salty about that too. So everything is charged with this like history. So literally everything can become an argument. Good morning, I think at some point in the book was like, what, why, what are you doing? What do you want? Like everything is kind of seen, because they've been horrible to each other. Mm-hmm. So it's like, not only is this becomes, I think, also kind of their love language, but because everything is heavy with history and all these kind of and you don't have to give a ton of backstory, I think, to make that. You kind of see how the character makes one thing about something else, right? And you're just like, who would be that mad? But then you kind of to understand, why everything is to the nth degree, because it's coming from a place of hurt, of a very, very old hurt. So, but also make it, and then like they're also both like kind of smart assy, witty, and always kind of have a funny turn of phrase. And so I think it kind of fuels that, right? Like they're just constant, and they can't leave anything alone. Nothing is left alone.
I love that so much. And now thinking back to the book, I definitely think that history, like, and everything always going back to, and the thing that I loved is it was like layered history as well, because it wasn't just the history between the two characters. It was then also the familial history and being able to throw that conflict. So it was kind of like layers and layers of conflict. But what that history did, and, it's not like we got 25 years of history, and there really was just like some key moments that they were able to like chuck at each other, but it made it so real and so believable that they really would hate it like that. I just couldn't stop listening to the book. It was so good. Anyway, okay, so how do you ensure then that the conflict that you create is organic and not contrived? Because I think that's like one of the issues a lot of authors face. It's not just creating conflict, it's then making it feel like, not contrived.
So I start with the conflict as the idea for like every story I write starts with what the conflict is, and then build the characters that would find themselves in that conflict.
How do you come up with that? Where do you start coming up with conflict?
So to talk about guava flavored lies, my wife literally says to me one day, you should write a story about bakers falling in love. And I was like, why? I mean, okay. And then I was like, okay, because you kind of like I think you could literally do that with anything, right? Booksellers is that movie You've Got Mail, and like, whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, well, why would they not be able to get together on page one? And then it's like, okay, well, they're competitors. And it's like, okay, so then why wouldn't they just avoid each other? And then I think from there you start to literally ask yourself those questions. So like specifically with guava flavored lies, it's like, okay, what kind of person would even have a rival or an enemy? Because usually in life, you don't like someone, you avoid them. You don't keep competing with them. You're just like, okay. And these are Cuban bakeries in Miami. There are literally a million. There's no real, everyone has their favorite. There's no real competition. And then it's like, okay, so who would even have a rival? They're competitive, probably, right? Because if you're a passive person, you're just like, okay, I don't know what her deal is. I just don't talk to her. And then why can't they just avoid each other? So what is keeping them interacting again and again? And why can't the conflict be resolved in a single conversation? And that's not to say your conflict can't be resolved in a conversation. It can't be resolved without any significant fallout. So even if you have just one big source of conflict, like one big secret, if you tell it, that's going to take a minute, but the consequences are so big that you're like, well, I'm not sure if I can. And then so it's like, I think you start, kind of building that way. And then you give them, I think, personalities that kind of clash. So the two characters in Guava Flavored Lies have very similar socioeconomic backgrounds. They both have the same goal, which is advancing this legacy of, these businesses that their great grandparents started, and they kind of have all this pressure on them to move forward. So they're both going to be driven go-getters, right? But they approach it differently. So one is like very traditional. So it makes her dogged. She's single-minded. She is like unbending. And the other one wants to do the same thing, but she wants to do things her own way. So she's more open-minded. She's a little more flexible. So that's kind of not only going to create conflict, but you've also then given them the tool to turn the conflict, because you need one of them to be able to see past the bullshit they've dealt with all these years and kind of start to turn it. So I think it's kind of like all of those things. And then you end up with something that feels very real. And I think, and we may get into a little bit more later, but layering the conflict is also kind of critical, and that's kind of said the mistakes people make in not doing that. But kind of it starts to feel real because you haven't imposed the conflict on these people. You've found the exact people that would react this way to the conflict. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm already like, I'm going to come back and write notes on everything that you're saying, because this is like, this is pure gold. And also funny, and no, I'll tell you that afterwards. So the other thing that I was going to ask is, like, this is a lot of thinking and like thought that goes into this. So what is your process? Like, how do you personally get to this point where you know all of this stuff about the characters?
It very much happens in my head. I think Becca calls I think I've mentioned to you before, and I always mess up the name. Not bread maker, bread machine,
Bread
writer.
machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where you kind of have to build it in your head, and then it just all kind of comes out. So it seems like it comes out fully formed, but really I kind of have to like marinate, percolate, like kind of let it. So usually when I'm writing, whatever I'm writing now, I'm percolating the next story.
Yeah.
So I start with like the thread of whatever. And like I said, my wife gives me 95% of my ideas. Like she gives me that thread.
Is she
Right?
high ideation?
She won't do the thing to take. I know.
What?
I know. But she's super like creative, and then we kind of will talk about it and develop the idea, and then off I go.
Yeah. Oh my goodness me. So she has like a personal author to just write the stories that she wants.
And she's good. She was writing a YA, but she gave it up because it's hard to land the plane. So she wrote like 75% of the book and was like, God, I can't end it. I know.
No.
And I'm such a finishing energy person. That's what we do balance each other well. She is all starting energy, right? I hate starting things, but I can't not finish things. So yeah. So she writes really funny dialogue too. She's better than me, but
oh my goodness, I can't believe. Yeah, that's so sad. Oh no. Like, you'll have to encourage her. She's got to finish it. She can't not finish.
And it's so good. When I tell you it's good, it's really good.
Oh, you're just teasing me now.
Yeah.
Okay, what are some of the common mistakes you see authors making when it comes to creating conflict, like in their romance novels?
So I think the prime problem, and I think we all know this, but sometimes it's hard to see it in our own work, is that the conflict is too thin or too easily resolvable. So I really do think about it. If these characters got stuck in an elevator for 10 uninterrupted minutes.
I would love to read that.
Right? Well, they'd murder each other.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
And that's the point, right? 10 minutes is going to make it worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like them being alone only makes it worse. If they really, so especially if you write adults, right? YA I think is different. You can get away with, because like teenagers argue over different things and have different conflicts, but I'm just talking like adult fiction. If 10 interrupted minutes could resolve the conflict or put them well on their way to resolving the conflict, there's not enough. So it's okay to use that conflict if you want to use it as a source, but that's where then layer in additional conflict. So like you were saying, yeah, okay, not only are we business rivals, but also we've went to high school together and we're little shits to each other and like super competitive. And then also our families hate each other. So like, let's say we resolve that. How even would we get together? Like our families won't accept it. So it's not just if you have this one and you don't want to let it go and you're like, yes, if they talked about it, the secret, okay, well then give it stakes. So, okay, all they have to do is clear up this misunderstanding. But if they do, their pride is on the line in a very real way, or there's financial repercussions, or there is hurting someone, right? Like they'd have to reveal something terrible they've done in order to kind of explain and move on from the conflict. So I think when you don't have conflict that's kind of robust enough, or there's not enough of it, you end up doing things like breaking them apart for no good reason. Mm-hmm. I almost never break up my couples at the midpoint, because my midpoint is about resolving, like how to then come together, right? So, and that's not to say sometimes they need to break up depending on what the situation is, but I think that's when you find you've written a character kind of exaggerating, having an exaggerated response to like a simple fight or simple disagreement. because you need to imbue the tension with something, right? The conflict with something, or you bring in a third character who's extremely opposed to these people's relationship. In life, you'd be like, okay, then get out of my life. Or there has to be some very good reason why. Like maybe it's a culture clash and the parent doesn't want to accept this person from a different culture and like, oh, okay, that is a third party, and maybe that's not so easy. Or maybe it is to say, okay, well, if you don't accept my relationship, I don't accept you. But usually for parents, that's hard, right? Whatever. So I think it's really stress testing. Yeah, I said that word. Your conflict to make sure it really holds up to some scrutiny. And it's hard for us to see it ourselves. I think sometimes we think we've written enough, and then you realize like, okay, so this would be a 40,000 page short story or novella or whatever, really, if they resolved it. So add more, right? Like that's always the easy solution. So you have 10 thin conflicts, but you have to kind of resolve each one before you can end the story, right?
Have you ever thought about writing nonfiction?
I have.
You should. This needs to be a book, because I
Only
just want to.
because of you, because of preparing for this. And I started thinking, like, does everyone do it this way? I don't know.
No, loads of people struggle with conflict. Like it's a big issue for a lot of writers, like especially for people who are conflict avoidant, right? Like a lot of creators are quite calm, neutral people, you know, and you can tell that by looking at strengths, and the fact that people like us who have high competition are quite rare, you know, in writers. It's not a strength that you often, it's like not one of the top strengths, but because somebody who's highly competitive obviously loves a bit of conflict, right?
Yeah, it's the best part.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think you should turn this into a nonfiction book. I want it. Will you write it just for me?
100%.
Yeah, okay.
But I have thought about it. That's why I want you to do a course on writing nonfiction, so I can learn how to write nonfiction. Thank you.
I think Joanna Penn's done one. I'm sure she's done a course on how to write nonfiction. I think so.
I love Joanna Penn.
I've got a book by her, I'm sure. We'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay.
I'm not going to let this go now, though, by the way, just so that you know. I'm going to be like DMing you. Where's the book?
Well, you know, I have a lot of thoughts all the time, so.
Okay. So kind of leading on from this, no, sorry, I'm not leading on from anything. What I want to know is like, how do you balance creating conflict with maintaining the romantic tension between the characters?
Yeah. So, and I think maybe because we are both, I'm not as high competition as you are, but it's in my top 10. Take a drink. But conflict is my favorite part, right? And maybe you can tell. So I use the conflict to fuel the romantic tension. So enemies to lovers is the easiest example of that. But I think you can use this for anything. These particular people who love each other but don't know it, because that's what every enemies to lovers is, or rivals to lovers or whatever. They get fuel from these bickering, bantering, pushing each other's buttons interactions. They might not admit it, right?
Oh my God. Right? Sorry. Just like total mind epiphany about my entire like formative years, and the fact that like I loved The Chase because it was all banter and all like all conflict and all like push pull. Oh my God. I'm so,
right, because that's the fun.
It is totally.
It's the fun. And then even if you have another kind of romance that's not enemies to lovers, there's always something forbidden about even contemporary romance. If not, they'd get together on page 1 and live happily ever after. So it's your best friend's brother, it's your boss. And so you have to, it's this, I want you, but I can't for some reason, whatever it is. I'm married. I'm, I don't know, took a vow of celibacy as a religious person. I don't know, right? Whatever, literally anything. I think that's Fleabag, right? That she like, I don't know if you ever watched that.
I did, but ages ago. I can't remember.
So there's something that you want that you can't have. So even if it's not the tension of bickering, it's the tension of restraint. So it fuels that conflict of why I can't get with you on page 1, fuels how that romantic tension builds. So you fall in love with your boss, or your boss falls in love with you, but you have all of these complicated power dynamics that you can't just give in, because it's always going to be an unequal relationship. So someone has to give up their job, or or even you can't tell whether do they like you back or not. So the tension is created by the conflict. That's why I always stop reading once characters get together. And I used to write my books like that, and people would be like, it just ended. What happened? I want to see how they live together. And you're, why? You already know who did it. Like, what else are you going to see? So now I add like 5 chapters, at the end to kind of, and then I leave a conflict open, right? So I've left something to resolve. It's not just them getting together. And it's like, okay, now we're together. We've resolved all our shit. How are we going to get our families on board? How are we going to, now one of us has to quit our job. And what is that really going to look like? So you leave a conflict open, right? Because otherwise, to me, it was just like a 5-chapter epilogue. I'm like, I don't care, So, but people care, right? You write books for readers, not for yourself.
I find this so interesting because that's such a, it's a very clear romance structure, but with a bit extra that I never really thought about. And you are literally doing it via the conflict. I think that's absolutely brilliant. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, my head is like, womp, 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 trying to like process everything you're saying, and how I can incorporate that. I think that's fucking genius, because I end, like, Hearts and Heists ended pretty quickly after the climax of the story. I think there was like I think there were 2 chapters afterwards, and even that was like, because definitely, like, you've reached the finish line.
Yes, correct. That's how I read too. I don't care what else happens. Not I don't care, but
it's done. We've won.
It's done.
Yeah.
It's done. The big thing I've been reading for, because I think anticipation is the most exciting part of, especially for romance, but anything, a thriller, a mystery, it's the anticipation of what's going to happen. And in a romance, the central question is not if these 2 characters are going to get together, because of course we know they will, otherwise it's not a romance, but how, right? It's the how. How will they overcome all this stuff? And so it's like, once you've answered that question for me personally as a reader, I'm satisfied.
Yeah.
And maybe if I really like the characters, I'll maybe want to keep it. But if I put the book down, I won't pick it up again. So it's like, if I finish it right then, fine. But I probably won't pick it up again if I put it down.
This is so interesting, because I think this is one of the things that I have learned about myself and how I like to read, and therefore how I like to write. Because for me, the sex, and this is, actually, I'm not going to say that, but anyway, the sex is separate to the emotion. Like, and I know for some people that's not the case, sex and emotion or whatever. But for me, the anticipation, because you are right, that is exactly what I read for, but it's the emotional anticipation. Right. That's the bit that I just cannot get enough of. But I want the sex now.
Yeah.
Give me the sex.
And that works so well for enemies to lovers, right?
Yeah.
You can have, there's not that many setups where, although sometimes, like when you read someone's hired someone to, like, what do you call it, fake dating,
yeah,
right? So even then you might have the physicality of a relationship depending on what you've hired this person for, right? But it is the emotion that you're waiting for. So I think there are absolutely, and people love that, right? That's absolutely a very valid, because you're still holding out for some big payoff.
Yeah.
So it's just the inverse of other, more sort of straightforward romances where you're holding, the emotion is growing, and then you're holding out for the physicality.
Yeah, it's why I think I would struggle to write a slow burn, because I just, like, I love the torture of reading slow burn, but I find it impossible to write, because I'm just like, none of my characters do as I say, and they all just bang like on page 1 basically. Yeah, so I don't know what that says about me, but I can move on swiftly.
Well, you can make that happen too. In, I think it was Crossing the Line, I had the characters have a one-night stand, and this is like a very old trope, right? They have a one-night stand, and then you've discovered who that person is, and you're like, oh, well, you are not someone I'm allowed to have sex with, not like illegal wise, you guys, but
yeah Grey's Anatomy.
Our relationship is such that, oh, you're my boss, my new boss, I hadn't
Yeah.
met, right? Like people love that. So
Yeah.
now you have both. You have the excitement of seeing these people's chemistry is outrageous, and now they have to wait for 70% of the book.
I know. Yeah.
Torture.
Oh, do you know, I'd forgotten how much I love that trope. That I might have to play
I
with
love it
that
too.
one. Yeah, I might have to play with that because that is what hooked me into Grey's Anatomy, because Meredith Grey
Exactly.
sleeps with McDreamy or whatever his name was, and then discovers he's her boss, and then like
Yep.
they don't sleep together for like several episodes, and I was just
Exactly.
like at the
And you're
TV like,
dying.
give it to me.
Exactly. But it'll scratch the itch, right? You've
Yeah.
gotten them together. But then also you're like, now you're in slow burn, but not slow burn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Oh.
try not to write slow burns, but they happen to me anyway.
No, but like they are exquisite. It's just like, and like the masochist in me is like, yeah, I want to read a slow burn. Like my beta readers, she writes slow burn, and some of hers are slow burn, and oh my god, they're amazing. Like it is torture, but like in the best possible way. And then like it makes it so fucking sweet when you get it at the end. I just love it. I love it. Okay. Leading on from that, then, how do you transition the characters from arguing to romancing? Like, are there any craft tools or techniques you use so that it's not whiplash and it's that kind
Yes.
of like gradual change?
It is the hardest part. I'm not gonna lie. That takes me writing that turn takes me the absolute longest thing. It's the longest thing to write. And sometimes I rework that bit of the outline for a while before I actually start writing. Because sometimes I'm like, oh no, this is insurmountable. I've made this conflict just too big. Like I have one where it's an undercover cop, sort of, but not really. Like an undercover agent, and she's investigating a criminal. And it's like, I don't know, I can't do it. So it's like that takes a long time to kind of, break that down. And in enemies to lovers, it can be exactly what you're saying, either whiplash or it makes the enemies part feel thin.
Yeah.
Where you're like, they weren't really enemies, so there's a few ways to kind of start that turn, which is, I think, and mostly it's sort of centered around people seeing each other in a different light. So some tactics that I've used or I've seen, I think, work are like rivals coming to each other's aid. So it's kind of like sibling rivalry where you can kind of be a jerk to your sibling, but nobody else can. So, you've kind of like, hey, don't talk to this person this way, or like, whatever. It's like, I'm the one who gets to be an asshole, not you, right? A common enemy or a common cause kind of will make people have to work together, and again, in a very natural way, in a very kind of believable way. One of my favorites is begrudgingly helping each other. So if you're like driving and you see that, they've got 4 flat tires, a hurricane's coming, and you're like, oh, I mean, I guess I can't leave them stranded on the side of the road to die. So, and then now you're forced together in the car. I love forced proximity. It's one of my favorite things. And I think for enemies to lovers, especially, it works super well, but for anything, I think it works really well. And it's all about bringing them together in like a new and unexpected interaction that changes the tone, can start that change of tone. Having the character see the love interest do something they think is out of character, but it's actually a nuance of their personality they refuse to see. So, you think this guy is like a super self-important jerk who only cares about himself, but then you see him, volunteering at a soup kitchen on his days off, and he doesn't know anybody's seeing him, right? Like, and that starts again to question my strong belief that I hate this person and they're literally the worst, right? Where it's like, well, maybe I've gotten something wrong. Discovering they have something major in common, a common trauma, if your story is maybe serious, an unusual interest. So, and all these things you can make as funny for a rom-com or as serious for a more darker tone as you want. Like they're very flexible. And then for age gaps specifically, and anything that's like a forbidden relationship, so like boss or, someone that's really kind of like taboo or out of reach to the person, and that's the conflict, those are the only times where I do separate them. I break them, not necessarily break up, but where I need time for them to kind of refocus and reframe who they are to each other. So in the one I had judge and intern, right? And that's someone that started like Grey's Anatomy. So it's, you know, you have a lot of things. You have an age gap, you have the boss relationship, she's a judge. So that's something that's you know, you have to be so careful. And they're both very ethical. Well, the young one is unethical. The judge is very ethical. So she's constantly fighting, you know, with herself. And it's like they have to break apart because the younger person also has to come back into the relationship on equal ground. So they have to have their own sort of ability to support themselves, their own, whatever it is, you know, so that they're coming back together equals and then able to move on from the conflict. So it's like if you read your favorite romances, you start to kind of spot these things because it's really just reframing. All you're doing is reframing your assumptions or, you know, your exaggerated idea of who the other person is. Because like when you can't stand something, someone, everything they do bothers you, right? Like I hate the way you breathe. Why? Oh my God, look at her with like that face. It's like it's just her face, girl. You just don't like her, you know.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm hearing some Sylvie here. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah.
But if you can, right, see them in a different light, you can start to turn that. And then I think you need one character willing to do that little bit of work to say, hey, come on, you know, like you're being crazy.
Yeah, and what I love about that is that when somebody is an enemy or a rival or even just like the love interest, but there is that level of conflict, your attention is focused on them and therefore you notice everything. One, because most of it annoys you, but two, because you either don't want them to beat you, you don't want them to better you, or because they're just all up in your face and you have this conflict. But because they notice everything.
Exactly.
And so it makes it far more believable, I think, that they then do start to notice the good and the bad. And right. I love that when they notice details. Like I'm just like, oh, you fall in, like
exactly.
That's my fave. They notice a thing that nobody else notices, and I'm just like, oh, swoon. Yeah. I don't know where this is going.
And especially because they don't know why they're noticing it, right? And it's like you watch that struggle within themselves of like, ugh, you know, even it's like a physical attraction that you notice or like whatever it is. And it's just super fun.
Completely agree. I love it so much. How do you handle like pacing of conflict in order to keep readers engaged, but also like to avoid overwhelming them? Because I think there is a bit of pacing to a romance structure anyway, but what about the conflict?
So I think the most conflict there ever be is going to be in like the first act. And that's going to be, and it'll hit like a crescendo at the end of that act where it's like full on resistance to them having to then, whatever the thing is that you're making them have to then interact with each other for the rest of the book. So, but, and I guess I'm trying to think of other scenarios where it wouldn't be enemies to lovers, but I'll think of that one sort of as the easy example. So the whole first act is them, it's the max, right? Like there's very little, you see attraction and you see heat, but you don't necessarily see love, right? Or like in like appreciation for that person. Like it's all my preconceived notions of you at their max. Then as you work towards the middle, that lessens because you're starting to kind of poke holes in that first act tension, with those kind of situations of seeing them in a different light or being, you know, forced together, seeing that they're not what you thought, or you start resolving some of the easy conflict, right? An easy misunderstanding that's only one of 5 points of conflict they have, and you start to pull them out, because at the midpoint there has to be enough. There still has to be conflict, obviously, because you want people to keep reading, but there has to be enough resolution of the conflict that they can make the turn. And then the back half of the book is resolving all the other conflict, whether it be between them, whether it be external, whatever they have left, but now they're working on it together. So it's an intensity at the beginning, I think the most intense, and then the pace starts to lessen throughout. If that makes sense.
It does. And if you don't write, this nonfiction book is an absolute travesty. Okay, like 2 more questions before the ultimate question. How do you then approach resolving this conflict? So we've sort of talked about where you do it and when you do it, but how do you actually resolve the conflicts in romance novels?
So I pin the resolution of the conflict to the theme. So if Guava Flavored Lies was about not letting old grudges keep you from living life fully and authentically, then letting go of the grudge is going to be the key to resolving the conflict. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think we do these things automatically, but we don't realize we're doing them. When we're writing, when we're reading, that's what we're looking for, because we've already seeded the answer to the resolution of the conflict for the reader at the beginning. The reader knows what these 2 people have to do. It's will they have the tools to do it before the end of the book. And I also think about, I can't remember where I read this, but it was something like I always think of a novel of a story of 2 halves. So the first half is the character, I always have kind of a protagonist, like one character is a little bit more the main character than the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I know some people don't write romances that way and they make them equal. I always have one that just naturally is, the story's a little bit more about their growth, because the other one's a little bit more balanced, because otherwise I think people can't really get together. But so the first half of the book is them doing things in their comfort zone, all wrong, right? Coming from the place of their emotional wound, the lie they believe about the world, whatever kind of terminology people have for that. And we see they're never going to succeed that way. And then at the back half is all about doing things in a way that hurts, that's uncomfortable, but that risk and that discomfort leads to growth, right? So I think that's the resolution of the conflict. Like, you let them live in that conflict and do it however they want, and then turn it and be like, no, you have to kind of reject the reasons for the conflict.
Okay. The last thing that I wanted to ask you about was family. Now, Guava Flavored Lies have had some of the most real and like all up in each other's business type family that I have ever read. I fucking loved the dynamics of like the families internally, but also the families like when they would like spat together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if you could talk about like how the hell did you make the families seem so real, and like just the side characters in general?
Yeah, I mean, Guava Flavored Lies is a little bit unique in that I don't usually have family features so heavily in the romance, but because this is like a generational feud between these people, the first scene I ever thought of was like that West Side Story type confrontation where like the families literally meet on the street, right? And it's like this ultimate clash.
Is that the treehouse? The treehouse.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite scenes. It was fucking incredible.
That was kind of the first scene. Usually I plot chronologically, but that's the first scene that like, my wife and I kind of brainstormed talking about it. And it's like, oh, what if this? And you kind of just up the stakes, right? Because these are all, I don't know any of these people, right? But these are all like archetypes of real people you would find in Miami in the Cuban American community, specifically of this socioeconomic background, this first generation immigrant, but the parents came so young that they're essentially in that hybrid place. And every Cuban family has the boy or young man who is literally treated like he can't fend for himself, and gets everything. And then the other child, sometimes not a girl, but most, usually a girl, who is just expected, you just do everything. And so that's like and maybe it's not just this culture, right? Every culture has, kind of things like that. So I gave everyone, whether you saw it on the page or not, a goal, a lie they believe about the world. And I give everybody zodiac horoscope signs.
I love that.
Yeah, because it's like such an easy, for me, because I love horoscopes and stuff, it's such an easy little shorthand of how I think they'd all react differently to the same situation. Because otherwise you get everyone reacting kind of how you need them in the scene versus this person would say this other person would say that. And you don't have to do a lot. They don't have a lot of speaking lines. Like some of the parents do, but like for the most part, it's just a flavor in the background. It's just this other source of conflict and tension. Like, what are the moms gonna say, when they see each other? And it's always a little bit of anxiety because nobody there keeps their mouth shut, right? Which is also fun, because that leads to a lot of conflict. Because they can't go anywhere. They can't have nice things. These people, they're all always ruining it. So, yeah. So I think see them and don't feel tempted to put on the page necessarily their goal, what their philosophy is. If you know it, you're gonna write dialogue that conveys it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Oh, I love that. I really hope that people go and read this book because it is a fucking masterpiece, and I genuinely think it is my favorite contemporary romance that I've ever read. So I just wish you all the success with all of the novels. I know it's not the latest one that you released, but like,
it was my favorite though. I can't help it. You're not supposed to like love one kid more than the other, but like, I don't know. I think it's the best thing. I don't think I'll ever write anything this good. I say it all the time. I'm like, well, that's it. I peaked. It's fine.
I mean, it is a fucking masterpiece. So yeah, everyone listening needs to go and read it. Well, this is the Rebel Author Podcast. So tell everyone about a time you unleashed your inner rebel.
All right. So, this question gives me agita because I am a rule follower. And I was going to tell you about the time that I may or may not have gotten my tongue pierced before I was of age to do it and then had to hide it. But I think instead I'm going to, a real rebellion, I think. I refuse to write shitty first drafts. I cannot do it. I will not do it. And I edit as I go 100% of the time. But Rachel Herron has said that's okay as long as you're finishing books. So, yes. But I feel very alone in my rebellion, Sasha. I don't think anybody else does this.
I think there are a small percentage of people who can do it, and those people who can do it, like, they are incredible. Do you have high communication?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because I've noticed a trend with people with high communication that often don't do, either they don't edit or they don't do very big edits. But yeah, obviously it's not that's not black and white for everybody who has high communication before I get shouted at. It's just a thing that I've noticed.
How very dare you.
Yeah, I know. I think it's incredible. Like, I actually would love to be able to edit as I go because I fucking hate editing. Mm-hmm. And so editing as I go would make my life so much better because I would not have to then do the thing that I don't actually enjoy. But I just can't do it. So I don't even bother trying now. I just write my shitty first draft because I know I can get it out. And then I just, persevere through the edits. But you are my hero. I love your work. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are most welcome. Would you like to tell everyone where they can find out more about you and your books and your nonfiction book that's going to come and anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, if we co-write it, what if I give you my notes?
Oh, that's
you
naughty.
already know how to do it. I've been trying to lure you into doing anything.
I know.
I'll find a way. I'm gonna Sylvie the situation. I'm just gonna just keep hammering. No.
Lauren.
Exactly. I think my wife and I do that to each other. I'm like, okay, Lauren.
Yeah.
I do want to say really quickly, thank you so much I know you hate compliments and you hate being put on the spot, but thank you for everything that you do. I've learned so much from you, from this podcast, from your books, and you do so much just to help us, right? And for nothing in return. So this is my absolute favorite podcast. It's the first thing I listen to as soon as it's up. And I know I'm not alone in feeling very grateful to you for your efforts, your creativity, bringing in so many different guests to talk about so many different things. And I've learned so much from you.
Thank you.
So thank you, and you have to accept it.
You're a bad girl. You did catch me unaware.
So my website is jjarias.com. I'm on most socials at the JJ Arias. And I only ever really go on Instagram, but I'm honestly like not great at social media. So, but I'll respond if you shoot me a message on Instagram. I'll respond eventually.
Yeah, and I think we've got all of those for the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of the show's listeners and all of the show's patrons. If you would like to get early access to all of the episodes, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Sasha Black. I'm Sasha Black. You were listening to JJ Arias, and this was the Rebel Author Podcast. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Katia from Miblart, and we are going to be talking all about how to use your book cover as a marketing tool. Don't forget to tune in and subscribe on your podcatcher. And when you have a moment, please leave a review.